All right, everybody, welcome to today's Seven Figures Club podcast. Today we have an amazing entrepreneur who has lived an epic life. Very excited to introduce you guys to Trevor G. Blake. Now, Trevor has done a lot of things in his life. He's written numerous screenplays. At school, he became a serial entrepreneur by buying candy in bulk, selling it to kids on the school bus. So he was a young entrepreneur. We're going to talk about that. In his early adult life, all he wanted to do was travel. So he used the very tools and techniques that you'll discover throughout this podcast episode of how to have an amazing lifestyle of luxury travel through 56 countries. That's about half of the countries in the world, by the way. And also, a few years later, he actually sold this business for $105 million. He has a unique business model. And I know our audience is a lot of startups, a lot of side hustlers. So if you were looking for real actionable items and things that you can do to build your startup, you're in the right place with Trevor G. Blake. Trevor, welcome to the show.
There are over 32 million businesses in the U.S., and over 90% of them will never break seven figures in annual sales. So how do we as entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs break into that seven figures club? This podcast will relentlessly share the secrets, strategies, and tactics I've used to create 3 multi-seven figures businesses and bring in even more successful entrepreneurs than me to share their inspirational stories and tactics to success. You can create your dream business and life right now. So buckle up and let's go.
Thank you, Leo. Looking forward to it. Let's dive in.
Okay, perfect, Trevor. Well, you've got an amazing life experience here as an entrepreneur. And let's start, if we could, a little bit, with your upbringing. We always like to find out, what is it that kind of led you to entrepreneurship, and what was your upbringing like, and the way you were raised with values and principles that you feel kind of led you down that path to entrepreneurship?
Well, I think like most entrepreneurs I know, and I consider myself in the same category as these entrepreneurs, we don't set out to be one, especially as a kid. So typically we find an issue, we try to find a solution. There isn't one, so we do it ourselves, and we end up being entrepreneurs by default. So that's been the story of my life, pretty much. So I grew up poor. My father was unemployed and unemployable. We lived on welfare. My mother was dying of cancer. So I didn't have an allowance, so I couldn't afford candy. So that's why I started the first company, really. Necessity is the mother of invention. So it was a 5 mile and an excruciating hour-long bus drive to school and back from school. And at one of the stops was a candy store. So no one would get off the bus because we were afraid the bus would go without them. The bus driver, it was always the same driver in the same bus, and he was not a very nice character. Couldn't stand children, which is a strange job for somebody to be a bus driver when you can't stand children. But so I decided I'll do it. I'll take it on. So I encouraged everybody to give me the money, the pocket change, and a list of candy that they wanted. I jumped off. The staff in the shop got to know me and were ready for me after a period of time, after I did this, for several days. And then I'd come back on the bus, and my commission was candy, because I couldn't afford my own candy. So that's kind of how I started. And, I realized very early on that people are willing to pay for convenience and service. And so that always stuck in my head. I went on to do several other sort of small businesses when I was a teenager. But like you said in the introduction, when you're poor, you don't get holidays, you don't get vacations, you don't get to see another country or fly on a plane or go on a ship or anything like that. I hadn't done any of that. And so that was always a passion of mine. So, and of my wife too, who also grew up very poor in England. And so for the first part of my life, my adult life, that's all we did. We traveled in a very, I had great jobs, earning $300,000 a year. So that's a nice level of travel around the world. And then when I turned 40, I just decided that there was something that really irritated me inside the company that I worked for. And I did what I say you should do, which is go and fix it. So I started my first company when I was 43. That's the one I started with $200 and sold for 105.5. And only at that point did I think I had the credibility to write my first book, which was basically, how did I discover these 3 attitudes or techniques or processes that I've applied to my life up to that point in time. And that was my first book, called 3 Simple Steps. And it tells the story of my journey, a journey from poverty, or quicksand, as I call it, to a successful entrepreneur. Only then did I think I had the authenticity to speak about it, because I'm not a fan of many self-help gurus whose only success is the fact they wrote a book and it caught on somehow. So I built a kind of unique business model in 2003, and I've just repeated it. So I'm actually on my 7th company now. So it's not 7 out of 20. I don't believe that you have to fail to be successful like many people do. It's 7 out of 7. And like you say, the 4 I've sold so far are all for 9 figures.
Outstanding. So was the first business that you started kind of as an adult, that was when you were 43?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Most people are surprised by it. The average age of a first time, you probably know better than I do. It's pretty high. It's been going down slowly over the years, but it's still around 40 for a first time entrepreneur, first time startup. The average age of a first time self-made billionaire is still 63. So there's plenty of time for everybody.
And I think that's so important for people to realize, because a lot of the times they see the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world and some of these other successful entrepreneurs that did get started really young and had some fortunate events and so forth. But you're absolutely right. Our job is to provide, funding and help startups get rolling. And no question, I think the average is we're seeing ranges from 35 to 55 is where most of these entrepreneurs are. And I think there's a reason for that. There's some experience. There's some understanding of people and sales and marketing, and then identifying that problem. So for you are obviously a successful business professional for a number of years. You're making great money. You and your wife are traveling the world. What was it? What was the problem that you identified that there really was no solution for? And then how did you take action to start that solution and that idea?
Well, the idea was inside a company. It was a pharmaceutical company, and we had a solution to a rare disease in children, but it sat on the shelf. And the reason it sat on the shelf is because it would have been in the traditional model, it would have been very expensive to get it off the shelf and educate the specialists who could look out for this disease when there's only like 200 patients in the world. So I proposed, maybe in my life in that company, I proposed probably 6 different business plans to try and get this thing off the shelf. And I was pushed back every time. I understood the reasons. I wasn't bitter about it. I mean, the shareholders would have gone crazy because all they could see is dollars going out. They wouldn't have understood the business plan. And so how did I get started? I had a blazing stand-up row with the CEO, and you never win those things. So I was given really no choice. I knew, okay, my time is done here. But we're still friends. And so eventually I persuaded him to sell me the rights to that product. And I needed to think of a different way of building a pharmaceutical business that's never been done before. So instead of hiring employees, I've never hired an employee in all of my companies. I used a hub model of alliances where we have, you have vendors and contractors who are specialist functions. And so that allowed me to just focus on growth and not spend all my time in a meeting room with that corporate nonsense that I've been brought up on, really. So that's really how I got started. I just decided to fix it. I didn't know what I was doing. I was totally unqualified. But I think that's true of most successful entrepreneurs. We just figure it out.
No question. So you've identified this problem. There's a potential solution for, did you say children with a rare disease?
Yes, it's children who are born without a particular enzyme, and so they're not able to convert complex sugar to simple sugar. So they die basically. And it's hard to go to sleep at night knowing that you can save those babies, even though you don't know where they are, but they're in the world somewhere. And so I figured it out. I mean, basically, I'm a great. So my website, trevorgblake.com, one of our taglines is where science, spirit, and entrepreneurship meet. And so I spend a lot of time meditating, where I get most of my best ideas. I spend a lot of time walking in nature. I get a lot of aha moments. Yeah. So I just did a lot of that. And so, I'd wake up at like 5 a.m. with this thing in my head. I'd go meditate, then go for a walk. And I started to figure it out just like that. I guess.
Beautiful. Tell us a little bit about the risks, right? So you are trying to be, and a lot of people don't know, hey, there's a lot of opportunities as an entrepreneur within the company, and you probably had done some projects and seen some success and commissions and growth there. But at some point, you had to become the entrepreneur. And so what were the risks? Like, you're actually taking money out of your pocket and buying, the rights to this medical solution, this pharmaceutical drug. And so how much did you have to risk? And then you had to basically walk away from the company. And so now your income stops. And so how did you, I guess, get the courage to take those risks, knowing the business and that there's no guarantees?
I was blessed to be married to someone who's an incredibly strong feminine spirit.
Yes.
And I remember when I had the idea. I was flying home from Minneapolis, and I had this great plan of how I can talk my wife into coming on this journey with me, and planned it all out, exactly what I'm going to say over dinner. Take her out, I arrive home, take her out for dinner, all the rest of it. And as soon as I walked through the door, she said, "We're selling the house, aren't we?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "I can tell. I can feel it." And
Wow.
she had this amazing intuition. And it just went, blah, 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 and it all came out. And she said, "Right, okay, fine, let's do it." So we sold the house, and we had some equity, not a lot, probably about 150,000, but that gave me, that bought me time. Yeah. I got a bit of a severance from the company, not a lot, but again, that's, put together, it probably gave me like 9 months to go to investors and say, "Look, I've got this great idea." And the 9 months passed like that, and I ran out of money pretty much. And then one day I just realized, you know what, they don't believe I can do this, so I'm going to have to prove it to them. And I think ever since then, I've realized that was one of the lessons that, investors really like to see a proof of concept. Once you can prove that you can do this, then we're all in at that point. You probably ask for that all the time from your clients, like, show us that you can do it. And so I found the rights to another product I could get for free. And with what little I had left, it was very small. It only did like 100,000 in business a year. I got it up to 450,000 in about 3 months using this new business model. I went back to the same investors that had politely rejected me, and I said, "Look, I've proved it. Now will you come in with me?" And that's kind of how it worked out.
Trevor, from 100,000 to 400,000 in 3 months?
Yeah, because the business model it's something that, the pharmaceutical industry is so antiquated in its business structure. It's very hierarchical, even, today. It's not very profitable. I was able to get profits of 76%. I didn't have executives earning like I had earned in the business, 300,000 a year with a fancy car and a big expense account and all that kind of stuff. I was basically, it's me and the business. And I didn't take me for a long time.
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack there. Let's unpack this. So you're in the startup phase and you're trying to raise capital. You basically run out of all the savings and the money from selling your house. Now you're in a really tight cash crunch. You've got a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, and you realize, and this is super important, everybody, so pay attention to this. If you've ever watched Shark Tank, Damon John always talks a lot about this. Proof of concept is what Trevor said. And that's what everybody wants to see. It's no longer, tell me about your theoretical idea that might work. I need to see proof and evidence that this business model, that your product or service does work on a small scale. And if you can prove that to me, now I can feel confident putting my dollars behind you. And it sounds like that's what you did. And you went and you found a company that you could implement the business model with, and to grow from 100 to 400,000 in 3 months. That is remarkable. Without going into too many of the details and any of your secret sauce, what would you attribute that? You talked about, the archaic way that they approached business, a lot of these pharmaceuticals, but if you had to break it down into just a couple simple steps, how would you, explain that massive growth? That's amazing.
Well, because I took all the overhead away. So the company that had that product and didn't want it anymore because it was more trouble than it was worth. Even the manufacturing one was more than the revenue they were getting. They had 3 or 4 people whose job it was to oversee that project. Each of one is earning, the pharmaceutical business is pretty well paid. People don't like, it's a cushy job. And so they're earning hundreds of thousands. And all you have to do is peel that away. And so it gave me a little bit of freedom to think, okay, I've got like $50,000 left. What am I going to do with this $50,000? So I segmented the market into an event and on a piece of paper and in my head, and by going out and actually talking to potential customers. And I suddenly realized that they had been targeting the wrong people. And so the customers would say to me, and they've been doing it from their office, they've been buying all this data and all this, but never actually getting out and talking to people. So I go to the customer set that I thought was the real customer, and they'd say, "No, it's not us, it's those people over there." And so I go to them and they would say, "We didn't know the product existed. No one's told us." And so it was really quite easy. It was all about communication. So I call it, strategic market segmentation, because investors like fancy titles, and that's really what it was. So I targeted it down and then funneled it again, just like we do with digital marketing, right? Until I got to the actual purchases, and then I realized that so I just turned to the right people and said, "Well, I've got the product and I've got tons of it. I'm going to throw it away in a couple of years," and we negotiated prices, and it went from there. It wasn't. You didn't need a great brain to do that. It's just that I think the hierarchical structures, people get stuck behind their desk so much and stuck in the room, they forget there's a customer out there.
Amen, Trevor. So it's identifying who's your dream client, what is that avatar? What do they look like? And what do they really need? So you went and basically based on who they thought the customer was, and the customer was like, no, it's not us. We actually don't need that product at this point. But you know what? Who does? These people over here. And then you could go and you spoke with them. You got outside of your comfort zone. And that's what happens. A lot of people get so comfortable. They don't go out and take action. It reminds me of the story of the founder of Samuel Adams, the beer brewing company, where he's doing everything, but actually going out and getting the sales with his customer, figuring out who his customer is. He finally gets into some bars and starts to make some progress after that. And that's the thing. When you're in the startup phase, you have to focus on sales and who is your dream client and what problem do they have and how can you solve it for them. And it sounds like you did that extremely well. So now you've got proof of concept. Now you go back to the investors. And they're like, all right, Trevor, you've proven yourself. You know what you're talking about. You've got proof of concept. Here's the money. Now what?
Well, then I just repeated. I'd created a plug and play model, and so I went back to the CEO I'd had a row with, and I said I got the money. I didn't actually have it, but I was pretty confident I would have it because I knew there was going to be a negotiation there. Unfortunately for me, the person who replaced me took an instant dislike to me. So I'm talking to the CEO, and he says, "Yeah, we probably have a deal," and then he passes it on to this other guy whose name I'll keep secret, obviously. And he was really not a very good person. And so he eventually called me up and said, look, the board of directors are met and we're not going to do this deal. We're not going to give you the rights to this product. The rights were 2.1 million. We're not going to give you, even if you got the money, we're not going to do it. And I didn't believe it. My intuition, because I've been surrounded by my mother and my wife who had amazing intuition, I've learned tools and techniques, which I teach at trevorgblake.com and in the courses and the books, to deepen your intuition, because we live in a world where we don't have time to call meetings and build teams anymore. Everything has to be really, really fast. So you've got to be confident in your intuition and make intuitive decisions. It didn't feel right. It felt like he's lying to me. I couldn't explain why. I just felt it. And I learned that they were going to San Francisco to a meeting in January, the JP Morgan conference, which is a classic healthcare conference every year. It's a jungle. And I typically don't go there, but I thought, I'll go there. So I was living in Seattle at the time, and I flew to San Francisco with no plan, booked a hotel room, and just wandered around. There's thousands of people in the pharma business, just wandering around looking for them. And eventually, the first day I couldn't find them. It was 5 o'clock. The place is shutting down. I went back to the hotel room. I lay on the bed and I thought, I'm giving up here. I'm not going to do that. I got back up. I'd already undressed to cool down, so I put all my suit back on again. I walked back to the meeting, which was about, 30-minute walk. It's now about 6 o'clock, 6:30 at night. And I'm just walking around an empty hotel where the meeting had been during the day. And I hear voices in a room, and I walk towards that room. The door opens, and it's that team. It's my team from my previous employer. And so the CEO, he comes out and he says, I thought we had a deal. And then I looked at the guy who was my replacement, and he couldn't even keep eye contact with me. So I stepped across him. I shook the hand of my ex-CEO and I says, yes, we have a deal, but there's a time limit now because I offered to do this deal months ago. I want it to be done by the end of next week. And that was it. We got the deal done.
Outstanding. I think that intuition is so important. And for whatever reason, sometimes when you're younger, I know I would struggle with, is my intuition on? Is it not? And at some point, you start to get really good at assessing what's true and what's not, and then taking action without any doubts. And that's what a remarkable story. And most people, maybe that doesn't happen. They stay in the hotel room, they give up, they don't keep going forward, and they don't follow through. And you've got to get a yes or a no. And just amazing that you pushed through that guy who was just being an obstacle, not even being honest about the company's intentions and making it happen. Remarkable. So now you're off and running and you're building the organization. And something important you've mentioned throughout our conversation here is you don't have to go out and hire these really expensive employees, especially at the beginning. You're better off with independent contractors who are much more performance-based and good at a certain thing, and ends up being a lot more affordable. Was that a part of your strategy then as you started to build up the sales of the company, or what was the step to now you're raising capital, you got to put 2.1 up front to have the rights, right? And what's the process of growing this thing to $100 million company?
It was 6 years is all it took.
Okay.
So there were two things happening at the same time. One was I didn't have a lot of capital in order to hire people, but also, I'd had this career in the business, And when I look back on my career, I'd spent 75% of my time sitting in a meeting room talking about anything but customer satisfaction or product improvement. It was all about keeping employees happy. And I'm sure most of your viewers and listeners know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's one of the main motivations to get out and start up, isn't it? It's like, say, I don't want that corporate madness anymore. And so I knew that I could come up with a different business model where that's not part of the business model. And I could focus on growth and marketing, which is, if I have a skill, maybe that's it. And talking to customers, how brilliant and genius is that to actually talk to customers, but it doesn't happen as much. The internet has kind of pushed this in a slightly different way. And so that was one thing. The second thing is I also realized that, in hiring people, you tend to hire according to the budget that you have. Most people start up, or not most people, but a lot of people start up, especially the startups that I get involved in, they come from the corporate world and they're used to saying, okay, I was a sales and marketing guy. I don't know anything about manufacturing. I don't know anything about regulatory. I don't know anything about, software engineering. So I'm going to hire ahead of this and ahead of that and ahead of that, just like you said. And before you know it, you've done several terrible things to yourself. One, that beautiful cash is gone. And secondly, you've created meeting chaos right from the very beginning, because even as a CEO, you're not going to sit there and just let everybody go and do their own thing, which is what you should do. What you're going to do is have an update meeting. Tell me what you're going to do this week, and then a meeting on a Friday. How did it go this week? And all of that nonsense, and you immediately go from focusing outside externally onto customers to this, what I call the internal whirlpool. So in one of my books, Secrets to a Successful Startup, I talk about the importance of starting the right way. The analogy I use is, if you bought a new house, you wouldn't buy a full-time handyman or handywoman to live in the spare bedroom just in case something went wrong. But that's typically how startups start, and it's hard to get out of that. And so if you start in the right way by saying, okay, right today, I don't need a full-time this, I don't need a full-time that. I'm, gray-haired enough, having seen how all the functions work together, to ride out, to be able to sort of direct and overlook those functions that somebody else can provide for me on a volume basis. So today I need a distribution guy 3 hours a week, and I need a manufacturing guy maybe twice a year. And so you purchase in that way, like you've said. It doesn't mean that that's always going to be the way. And that's why I've exited so often, because I like this business model. I'm happy. It's my style. Doesn't suit everybody. So you get to a point where it's no longer really cost effective, and so that's when I exit. So I exited the first one after about 6 years. Second one, I only took 2 years to get to that point where it's too big for me now, and it's not cost effective to do it that way. And really, it deserves to have full-time employees. But I think whether the early period is months or a couple of years or 6 years, I think. I try to encourage entrepreneurs, sit back and just think, do you actually need to hire at this point in time?
I'm curious, at the beginning, as you're going through this process and you're looking at, okay, I've got some independent contractors that I hire out for temporary things that need to be done. And then you have some full-time. With some of those full-time people, is it important to get people who could do several different things, instead of just being, this is someone who can only focus on this small aspect of the business that maybe you see in corporate America? Did you purposely go out and look for people who had the capacity to maybe do multiple things, and instead of hiring, multiple people, you hire one person who can do a lot of things pretty well? I'm curious if you had any strategy like that.
My imperative was not to get the best price, but get the best partner, so the best vendor. And what I found very early on was, I started off thinking, I need this. And let's say it was manufacturing or something. And I don't really understand manufacturing. I know how it works, but I'm not a chemistry guy. So I'd get this, and he said, we'd do a contract. And he's already got contracts with the big companies. So I'm not going to waste time wordsmithing a contract that he's had an army of lawyers put together. I'm just, all I'm going to do is change the name. Okay. So take Pfizer off and put, my little company, Qual Medical, on or something like that. And so make it really easy for them, because if you make it hard at the beginning, they just don't want your business because it's not worth their time. So then I'm in the door, and then this real expert, so the vendor's an expert in this business, right? They don't need to be supervised, and they don't need me to tell them how to do their job. So they would come to me and they'd say, okay, we'll do it. We can do it this way at this price. And then they would ask me a question like, who's doing this function? I'd say, what function? And they'd say, and it would be like a subset of, say, manufacturing. I didn't know we needed anybody. I didn't know that we needed that. So they kind of helped me build the model, because we'd have this like peer-to-peer conversation instead of supervisor to employee conversation. So peer-to-peer, they want this to work because they don't want to be in a position where they've taken me on and the contract, I can't afford to pay them. So I found the first, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 vendors who have been in all my businesses now. They saw what I was missing and what I was lacking. And they trusted me enough to see what I was trying to build, and they wanted to help build because there was a big impact, with helping people get well. They wanted to be a part of it. They really helped me build out the hub model. I didn't have to sit down and build a full business plan and say, I need 6 of this and 2 of that and 4 of that. I just basically started and then realized how little I knew. And that's a good thing. That's a good trait, I think, isn't it? For most entrepreneurs.
Very good.
Recognize how much you don't know. And then let them help you build it. And it's just a lovely way of working because the trust is there, and then you get a success. And the first success, I made sure that I shared some of the profit of that first success with everybody who'd helped me get there. Next business comes around, they couldn't wait to get involved in the next business because that was a nice payday for everybody. They wouldn't get that with their employer. So it's more fun, I think, working that way.
So we're talking about strategic partnerships, and in my business, it's 95% of our business is strategic partnerships and making deals work, and everybody has a win-win scenario. When you're looking at a strategic partnership, whether it's someone who's going to help with manufacturing or marketing, sales, whatever that is, what do you look for in identifying, okay, this is a strategic partner who I can work with, and how do you kind of identify and know that that's someone or a group that you want to work with?
Well, I think first of all, they have to reflect my own culture, because it wouldn't be fun working with them otherwise. So the mantra for all of my companies has been the same: make a positive impact in people's lives, have fun doing it, and sharing all the rewards, material or otherwise, that come naturally as a result of setting that energy into flow. It's a lot of words, but it kind of summarizes the way I think building companies is magic. I don't see the difference between real magic and or art or music. With art, you see a blank canvas and you fill it. With a business, you have a winning idea and you convert it into its material equivalent, and it's magic is the conversion of one form of energy into another. So I look for people who think the same way, because that then makes it easier. I don't have to teach that or coach that. But then it comes down again to the same big thing. 80% of the decision is purely intuitive, and I've learned enough at the knee of my mother and my wife to develop tools and techniques that can help me, have a much better intuition than I did have 40 years ago. And all those tools and techniques, a lot of them are available for free on my website, trevorgblake.com, so people can just go in and take a look at it. But even after all that time, I would say my intuition has maybe gone from 5 to 25, whereas the powerful women I've known in my life, they started at 100. Okay, so I would never get to their level.
For some reason they do. Yeah, my wife's very similar. She'll meet somebody, right up front. No, okay, that's someone you should work with, or no, that's someone you don't.
No,
and inevitably, after time, it proves out to be right. So
you're right. I've gone against it once when I wanted to get a partner, and I said to my wife, I'm bringing this person in, and she said, no, he's bad news. And I got quite indignant. I said, well, how can you say that? You've never met him. You don't know anything about him. I've worked with him for years. And I went against her advice and I brought him in, and it was a disaster. Absolutely disaster.
Unbelievable. So we're going to dive into in just a minute, guys, TrevorGBlake.com and all the amazing tools to learn from a 9-figure exiting entrepreneur who's done it multiple times. But before we do, I just want to ask one final question in terms of building that business. You've had 4 exits, is that right?
Yes.
So how do you go about identifying that group or that company, whether it's private equity or it's a huge strategic partner who really wants to buy you? What's the process of identifying potential suitors who would be interested in buying your company, in your experience?
Well, to answer that, Leo, we have to get into kind of the woo-woo world for me, because I'm, so my education is as a physicist. So I'm absolutely, addicted to quantum physics. And so for me, it's all about energy. And so, we don't have time, I think, to go into why this works scientifically, but it's going to seek a partner for an exit is the absolute opposite of what you should be doing. What you should be doing is already before you start, imagining that this thing I do, you've got your exit strategy in your head. Okay. You might want to keep it and go to $1 billion. That's fine. That's your thing. But for me, it's to get out at a certain point. And so I imagine selling my first company for at least 100 million before I'd even before I'd even sold the house to raise to get the equity out for the thing. So it sounds new agey and everything, but if you imagine your success before you even start to go along that journey, then they find you and you don't have to worry about that. So in every single case of my companies, I've been merrily getting to the point where I think, it's about time the business model changed. I think, it's about time I went off and did something different. And then the phone rings or I'd meet somebody at a meeting and they didn't even know I existed. We talk about what's going on and they become fascinated and they do some due diligence and it goes from there. So I've never actually networked anybody. I've never gone out there and advertised that this company is now for sale. It always just comes naturally because in my imagination, it's already happened.
Outstanding. So kind of from that book, 7 Principles of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind. And I think that's super important because if you don't start your business with the end in mind and in visualizing that success and that eventual exit, you may not build a business that's exitable. And so that's super important. Instead of worrying about who's going to buy it, it's more important to how can I build this really attractive asset that is a business that solves a really big problem. It's a business, I'm sure, that can run on its own without you having to be there because you've got the right people and the right product and the right systems and processes and so forth. And in your business, there's kind of, I think, another really important aspect of selling businesses and all the research I've done is having a recurring revenue stream, right? That you're not having to go out and always get new customers. They're coming back to you. And probably in some of the pharmaceuticals, I imagine there's a truth to that where customers are coming back, or at least you have strategic partners who are constantly bringing in new customers for you. How important is kind of that recurring revenue model in building a business that can be exited?
Well, all of them have to have that.
All of them. There it is.
All of them. And
wow.
And the other thing, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, I know, but especially in the digital marketing world, but I think it's true for everything. Yeah. You have to make it so easy for the customer to say yes. You got to make it so easy, so they don't have to think about it. That's not easy in pharmaceuticals because of the pricing structures, which are insane in some cases. So what I did was I said, okay, we ship free and we sort out the details later. And so, and that was it. So if we identified, if a patient is identified, the product arrives on the doorstep the next day, and then we figure out the rest. And so our customer, which in some cases is a parent of a child, in other cases is the patient themselves. In those businesses, my other businesses weren't pharmaceutical, but 3 of them were. And so the customer is totally satisfied from the moment that it happens. And then they start to think, well, I don't have insurance, whatever. Inside our packages, you don't have to worry about this. The most you'll ever be charged is $30. We'll sort out the rest. And then I had a vendor who would do all the insurance things, and 25% of patients got the drug for free. And, the pricing structure is such that if you have that smart business model at the beginning, it's very profitable, even with making it that easy. But, in the digital marketing world, we have to do exactly the same thing because people expect to be able to try something for a while to see if it works before they pay for it. That's the world we live in now. I mean, I have 12 of these blue shirts. I might not have liked the color blue and I would have sent them all back. The vendor who sold me the shirts has to take that into consideration and be prepared to make it so easy for me to make a decision. So that to me is critical these days.
Always thinking about your end customer and how can you make life easier for them and over deliver value. And certainly that's something that Amazon, a lot of companies, those who have focused on it, have been able to grow and scale. All right, you guys, I was just going through Trevor's website right here while he was talking, and it looks like you've got another website called 3simplesteps.com. And I want to read this to you guys. This is awesome. All right, so it says Trevor G. Blake, author, screenwriter, wizard, serial entrepreneur, a physicist by background who grew up extremely poor and bullied in a medieval village, no less, eventually tapped into the workings of energy, consciousness, and transformation. His first book, 3 Simple Steps, is a New York Times bestseller. I'm buying it right now. Teaching how to take control of your destiny and reshape your mind for increased creativity, serenity, and achievement. As a serial entrepreneur, listen to this. Trevor is now on his 6th after selling the first 3 for over $300 million, all while never hiring a single employee or working more than 5 hours a day. That's a formula I think we'd all like to learn a little bit more of. Tell us a little bit about 3simplesteps.com and why everyone needs to go there right now.
Well, you can go to 3simplesteps.com or trevorgblake.com. They dovetail, obviously. So it's a program. So the first thing is to get control of your mentality and raise your self-confidence, because all the studies into what make people successful or not comes down to the same two things. Those who are successful have higher self-confidence and a tendency to set targets. So it's all about that. And then I think it's very hard to find success in whatever endeavor you're looking at without going through a transformation process yourself. And so three simple steps will take you this way, or trevorgblake.com will take you that way. There's a course called Transformation. It's taken me my life to learn how to put that course together, obviously. But it takes you through a life-changing experience for 30 days from understanding what we're made of, understanding that we're all made from the same stuff, figuring out what energy is, and then how to change the way we play with energy. And when we do that, we get control of our outcomes. So instead of me being here a guest on this show and saying, oh yeah, I've had 7 successful companies, but I failed in 13 before that, I'm able to say I'm 7 for 7 because I've followed this way of playing with energy. And that's what that is all about. That's what 3 Simple Steps is all about. So it's a little bit biographical, but it's also scientific. And the reason I wrote it was because I get turned off by all the new age, positive thinking and believe it, you'll see it when you believe it and all that nonsense. Scientifically, that can't be true, because positive thinking is an illusion, because our thoughts happen in 500 milliseconds. But what you have control of is recognizing the thoughts you just had and then reacting to them differently. And as entrepreneurs, we have to do that because we second guess, and we don't have a load of people around us to tell us we're brilliant people. We're putting out fires a lot of the time. And so it's quite easy for your self-confidence to be knocked back down. So if you have tools and techniques that can get you back up, it just catapults your opportunity to see success.
Yes, it does. No question. It's a lot about who you become throughout the process to actually become a successful entrepreneur. And I'm hearing kind of ringing true values and principles. And you could take away Trevor's money, you could take away his businesses, but because of the values and principles that he holds and everything he's learned and how he executes his life and how he treats people and how he focuses on a customer, and he'd have it all back within just a few years because of these values and principles. So guys, make sure you go to trevorgblake.com, or you can go to 3simplesteps.com. That's a great website, 3simplesteps.com, great web domain there. And how awesome is that? Just that you're able to build these $100 million businesses without having to go hire tons of employees and work, 100 hours every week. Like, you actually can do it with the right business model and the right framework. And it sounds like there's a lot of that they're going to learn in your book, in your challenge, and then you've got different programs as well. Tell us a little bit about there's a lot of entrepreneurs and startups and side hustlers listening to you right now. What's the best way that what are all the different ways they can work with you? I mean, they can read the book, they can go through these programs. How much more, is available for them?
Well, if you go to trevorgblake.com, I've got so much free stuff on there. So one of the things you'll get straight away is a free download. It's a short course, no strings attached. I put it together for COVID because there's a tsunami of people moving to work from home, but there was no training on how to work from home. And so it's called The Practical Magic of the 5-Hour Workday. And it's not that you can only work 5 hours, it's that you should only work 5 hours, because the brain gets tired after 2 hours.
Yes, it does.
And you get diminishing returns. But also it's a surprise to a lot of people, is that we're at our most creative when our brain is actually tired. And so if you do 2 hours of your analytical stuff and your productive stuff, and then you go for a walk in the woods for an hour, that's where the aha moments come in. And that's where you slap yourself on the forehead and say, why didn't I think of this 2 hours ago? So it's about building a structure and a schedule where you build in, you treat the relaxation times and those down times with the same dedication as you would do a business meeting. And, I learned this the hard way, because when I started my first company, I was trained, in the typical traditional hierarchy. And I found I had so much time on my hands because I wasn't spending it in meetings, that I would sit in front of a computer waiting for an email or I'd wait for the phone to ring, and you get burned out really quickly. And then it's hard to grow. So if you rather than you have to learn this the same way, I've put it out there for you so you can understand. And that's how the world used to be before the Industrial Revolution. People only worked 4 hours a day. Yeah. And there's a chance to go back. And that gives you the balanced life, because I didn't want to be like some of the entrepreneurs I've met who work 14-hour days, but they're on their third marriage and they're taking antidepressants. I have a beautiful life. I've been happily married for 40 years until, unfortunately, my wife died last year. But I'm so grateful for that amazing 40 years. That's what everybody should be experiencing, like this amazing lifestyle, and also enjoying what they do, which is by building stuff, fixing stuff and building and creating. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think they're supposed to work together, but you have to think in a slightly different way.
Trevor, that's amazing. 40 years of marriage, and obviously a woman who supported and helped to create an environment for a lot of your success could come together. And we're certainly very sorry to hear about her passing, but what an amazing, legacy that she's left behind and that you guys have created. And it sounds like now you're in that period of life where how can I help others, to follow this path to success? And most people don't know about it, right? They're stuck maybe in a corporate job and there's not a lot of opportunity for growth and income. And there are solutions out there. So guys, go to, 3simplesteps.com, go to trevorgblake.com, take action. And Trevor, give us the last word of, that you want to share with everyone today.
We've talked about a lot of stuff. Okay. And the more we talk about it, the more complicated sometimes it seems. It's so easy to be successful as an entrepreneur, but you've got to start the right way. And the key word is start. You can't figure it out. The best piece of business advice I was ever given was by the guy who built Amgen and IQOS. That's $130 billion worth of enterprise value. He was a pharmacist, didn't have any skills in finance, didn't have any skills in sales and marketing. And I was having dinner with him one time before I started my first company, and I was waxing lyrical about this new business idea I had, the new structure. He put his hand up. He was in his 70s then, and I was in my 40s. He put his hand up and he said, "Trevor, you don't know what business you're in till you get in the business." And then he cursed, "Just start."
Just bleeping start.
Just bleeping start. And I didn't really understand the advice until I did start. And then I realized I thought I was going in this direction, and suddenly an opportunity shows up, which I never would have known about. And now I'm going in this direction. So you can't figure it out, just start.
Amen. Well, guys, everybody take action, get started, listen to this podcast again, take notes. If you have other friends, family, partners who are in a similar situation, looking for options and opportunities and the right way to think to create success in your life as an entrepreneur, as a startup, as a side hustler, then share this podcast. Give it 5-star reviews because of Trevor and the amazing value that he delivered today. And above all, take action, get started today. And Trevor, thank you so much for being a guest on the 7 Figures Club podcast.
My total pleasure, Leo. Thanks for the questions.
Are you looking for more 7-figure secrets, content, or even how you can launch your own recession-proof business? Then check out 7figures.com. That's the digit 7, FIGURES.com, where we share more videos, stories, strategies, funding solutions, entrepreneurial education, and even the secret business type that's recession-proof. Thank you for listening, and if you're finding value in our podcast, please give us a 5-star and invite others to join the club.